Shirley Adams here with the 10th program in Series 3 of the Sewing Connection. I know a little girl who just does not like to take a nap. As a special inducement, I've made her a gift, a turtle quilt. The point of this is that just as a turtle carries his house on his back, this pillow is the storage enclosing its own attached quilt. We'll open it to see how it works. This is made, obviously, for a child, but transpose this idea and, on adult terms, it could also be a family room afghan, or a car robe, or a carry-along for a football game, either to sit on or to open up and cuddle into if the thermometer dips. So let me show you how, and you decide if it fits into your needs. This one I have put a turtle on to show you it's a turtle quilt. Now it's a very childish looking turtle. I've been telling you that all these things I show you non-artists can do. Well, now you're convinced of it. Now you know I'm not an artist. This is my version of a turtle. But what happens is that if we pull that turtle out of his shell, we have this quilt. And it's kind of a fun thing. It all opens up about child size, and also as we open it up, the pillow itself turns inside out. The container, the shell, turns inside out. Now what's fun about that? I can just picture the child I made this for, and she is undoubtedly, as she gets under this to take her nap, the fact that the pillow is here on the back side, down at maybe at the foot part, she's probably going to tuck her little tootsies in that and just have a real cozy time as she takes a nap. So it's kind of a fun thing. But here it is on the right or wrong side. It's reversible. It doesn't matter which side you use. What I've done with this after I had it made was do a lot of little decorative stitches just because I wanted to try out the machine and see what all it would do on the decorative stitches that you don't use maybe a whole lot, and we ought to try them more. But to make this quilt, here's a smaller version, and I'll show you how it can be done. I have stacked here a layer of batting first of all. So that's what's on the bottom, a layer of batting. And then on top of that, a back or front of the quilt, it doesn't matter which one really, and on top of that the other side. Put these two right sides together because they are going to turn right side out after we're finished. I've just put a few pins in this already, and I'll finish it up to hold it together just a little bit. It doesn't take many. And I'm going to do this very quickly on the serger because if you have a serger, it'll be quicker to do it that way than it will be on a machine. It could go just as easily on a machine. Either way you want to do it is fine. I'm going to start kind of about here, and I'll stitch all around to about here, and I'm going to leave this space open right here in the center at the top. Then I'll turn it right side out through that space. And then later on the pillow would be sewn right there and it would close it up afterwards. So over here on the serger, we'll just take a little swipe out here to the edge. So since I'm starting midway, midpoint, or beyond, I'm starting about 3/4 of the way over probably. So we'll just stitch this and go off the edge and come on back around to stitch it down one side. And I haven't even bothered to trim off the back completely because of course the serger will do that. Get this out of the way so it won't be fed through a second time. These would make terrific gifts for whatever occasion it is. This is a non-occasion gift in this case. It's just that she's at that age where she just doesn't want to get to sleep. There are too many exciting things to do. And we're coming up the home stretch here and about finished. There. And that quickly you have it all done. Now if it does have deeper corners, if you for instance did it on a machine instead, you'd probably want to trim off all those corners so that you could not have any bulk in there. But the fact that this all trimmed off by itself, I won't bother to do that. And after all these pins are out, then we're ready to turn it. And it's simply a matter of be careful how you turn it. Don't get between the fabric and the batting. Get between the two layers of fabric to do the turning. And you just reach through to the corners and get them going. And this other corner. And pull it through. And so it's a real quick little deal. So if you have a whole lot of little ones to make these for, it still wouldn't be much of a job. These two fabrics, well, one of these fabrics that I have here came from a fabric shop by the yard. The other one is a part of a sheet cut up. And if you want to use sheets for your home decorating, you can figure about in a twin size bed, the top sheet, the flat sheet, you can figure that you have about 3.5 yards of fabric. That's the small, the twin size. In a full size, it's about 4.5. Queen is 5.5, and a king size sheet is 6 yards. So you really get a lot of fabric there, and if you thought, gee, the cost of some of those sheets can get pretty high, remember, you've got a lot of yardage there, so maybe it doesn't seem all that expensive after all. But anyway, here would be the finished quilt. This, I guess, a doll size, since it turned out quite small, or since I had cut it quite small. Then what I did was put safety pins all over just to hold it in place, and I think I still have one in the finished quilt here. So with that safety pin, I had these in all the squares all over, and I didn't actually do this quilting. I really just bought this fabric that was pieces quilted together like this, so I didn't do this job. But I did originally have in all these squares where I have the little decorative stitches, I did have these safety pins everywhere. And so with that whole group of safety pins, then you can take them out as you come to it, but at least it holds it in place while you're manipulating it under the machine. If you use straight pins, it's probably a little more difficult because they're going to get caught everywhere. So do get in a supply of safety pins, and that's the easiest way to get it all pinned together. You'd press around the edges, of course, and then do that decorative stitching. And you're about finished with it, except for that pillow that's over here. Now this pillow, I really meant to have a ruffle all the way around that would stand out, and the reason I don't, the reason it's stitched down here around the edges is that something I discovered is that that pillow, for the thickness of the bat that I have here, that pillow should have been a little bit more than 1/3 of the distance across this quilt. So I'll let you profit by my mistake and make sure your pillow is big enough. Mine wasn't quite large enough, and it was hard to turn the pillow into it. Therefore, instead of having this ruffle loose all the way around, I took a little bias here and just stitched it down around the edges so that it would give me a bigger pillow. Instead of stitching the pillow down right on this line, I stitched it out here. So it gave me an extra, about 6 inches all the way around to tuck that quilt in. So if you want your ruffle out, fluffed out all the way around, remember that and make sure that it's a little bit more than 1/3 of the way, the actual pillow top, omitting the ruffle. There are 3 different ways over here in the corner that you might finish off a pillow, whether it's this one or any other pillow. But here I have one with a ruffle. Here's one that has some piping around the outside. And there's one down there that also has some piping, but notice how there's ruching in that piping. It's all crimped up. So I want to show you how to do those various things so that you know how to trim the outside of a pillow. And what I have already started here at the machine is a ruffle. Now I'm going to eventually put that ruffle on a pillow, but the ruffle I have on a pillow is like this. It has been hemmed with a rolled hem foot is how, but it's been hemmed so that it's just one thickness, and I decided that isn't really what I want to do to any of these pillows because I'm going to see both sides of this ruffle. Therefore, instead of having this type that has the hem on it, it's kind of a nice idea to just use a double thickness of fabric instead. So instead of hemming the edge, this is using twice the distance I want, twice the width, and just putting the 2 raw edges here together, and then those raw edges we're going to ruffle. So this is using a gathering foot. You can also do it by any means you want to. You could use 2 layers if you preferred of or 2 rows of stitching, just big stitches, and draw up that thread. But this is using a gathering foot. And what makes this work is that, for one thing, I have put the thread tension quite tight here. It's way up to 10, whereas its usual spot would be on about 5.5. So I've really put the tension so that it's up kind of tight, so that's going to pull. That's one thing that helps it. But then also the amount of, or the distance, the size of the stitches makes a difference. I'm going to put this down to small stitches, and you'll see it won't ruffle much at all. See how it just barely ruffles with small stitches? As I get to bigger stitches, I'll come way up here to 5, then you can see it ruffles a lot more. So, depending on how much you want to ruffle, and when you start this out, it's probably not a bad idea to take just a scrap of your fabric first and ruffle it up to see. For instance, if I start out with 18 inches, half a yard, if I start out with just a strip of fabric, a scrap that's that big, I would want to ruffle it up and see what it measures down to. Probably the best ruffles come out to be about 3 to 1. So that means that 18 inches would ruffle down to about 6 inches. So try it out on a scrap first, experiment, see what you have going, and then you'll have your ruffle all finished. Now you want to know in advance exactly how big this ruffle is going to be, because it has to fit all the way around that pillow top. So here I have some ruffles that I'll pull over here to use. I'll get this quilt out of the way. I guess I won't need it for a few minutes. I'm going to bring my pillows over here. Now this is just a little one I'll be working on. So this is only, about a foot big, I suppose. Most pillows run in standard sizes. If you're going to stuff it with a pillow form, they usually run in 14 inches or 16 inches, and you always make this then about an inch bigger than the finished pillow will be. You cut it about that much bigger. So this one possibly wouldn't even fit a pillow form, and I might have to make my own just out of fluffy fiber fill, one of the thick bats I might have to use to make my own for this. But with this one, I'm going to put that ruffle on it, and it would go on the right side of whatever the fabric is. Now, as I said, this is purchased. Had I done it, I would have had those stripes going a little bit straighter there in the plaid fabric. But here's my ruffle, and I've already measured this so that it's the same distance around as the circumference of this pillow. So right on the stitching line, not the outer edge, which is bigger, but right on the stitching line, which is going to be, maybe about a ½ inch in is what I'll do on this. So I'm going to put right sides together. And I also don't want the ruffle where it's going to end up in the, eventually when it's finished, I want that ruffle toward the inside as I do this pinning. So I'll pin it down here so that it's on the inside. And with this all pinned in place, once it is, then you'd put the other pillow top on top of this and do the sewing. Now as you get to the corners, you're going to have to kind of pleat this up here a little bit at the corners. I'll work on this corner over here maybe. And as I do get to that corner, I'll have to pleat it up because I want some extra there so that as I come around the corner, there'll be plenty so that it won't be skimpy. So I might even choose to, I'll get the ruffle back there out of the way, I might even choose to, at this corner, kind of squish it together a little bit and make more gathering there than was actually done there by the machine. So here I am squishing this together a little bit to put a little bit more in there. And I did that figuring when I started out. I made this so that it was just a little more ample than I really needed so that I could get the extra in here at the corner. Now it's also possible with that gathering foot that I have on the machine to gather it and stitch it on to the pillow all in one operation. If you're going to do that, to put it all on in one operation, be sure you practice that first on a scrap to have your technique going just right so that it will work out nicely. And this takes a little bit of time to do, not too terribly much. You can also, after you pin this on, just put the top directly on it and stitch it all in one operation. If you're a little unsure of yourself, it's a good idea to stitch this on first, then put the pillow top on, turn it over so that you can just follow these stitches that you made the first time and do it a second time. So if you want it to be very accurate, that might be the best way. But we'd pin this ruffle all the way around. Now it would take me the whole time if I would actually put it all together and finish this pillow, so I'm not going to. I'm just sort of showing you how it works. But you do that at each corner. When you're completely finished then, and you have all this extra, if it's going to help you any, you might even, because this is sort of unwieldy, the way it's all sticking up everywhere, it might even be helpful to you if you take some Scotch tape to get it down out of your way so that it can't bounce back and get in your way as you stitch. So here I am putting a little tape, and I would, for instance, just scrunch this all together here and then put some tape over it so that it holds it here in place temporarily so that I could more easily stitch around without having the ruffle get in my way. So this is how you do it if you want that ruffle. And after you have, of course, all this pinned on, then you just stitch right along 1/2 inch from the edge. Put the top on, stitch that, but be sure to leave an opening somewhere so that you can turn it. So I would leave one of those edges when I put the pillow top on. I'd leave it open so that I can turn it. Another type edging that you might use besides the ruffle. Now this ruffle, not only did I use that, but also notice that I have a piping here. And this little piping that goes in between the ruffle and the pillow top, if I would use that piping, this is the time I would put it on. Right now, before I go beyond, before I actually pin that ruffle down, I would put that piping down here, also with its raw edge out to the outside. I'd put that piping on here and put the ruffle on top, maybe pin through both of them, but it might be safer to get this really, really straight to put just the piping on alone, then put the ruffle on, and possibly at the same time you pin the ruffle on, you might want to pin the pillow top on to make it fast. As you put piping on, well, as you make piping, let's make it first and see how it works. And I'm going to have to adjust my machine back to straight stitch, so I'll take off the gathering foot. Look through your feet to see if you might have one that looks like this. They look different depending on the brand of machine that you have. They look different, but it's going to be some sort of a little thing. You see this one does have the little slot there that you can put both the ruffle underneath and the pillow top there if you want to do both of them at one time and ruffle under, but that's the type you better practice. There are 2 different feet you might use to make this piping. Here's one of them, and with this foot, what does the job easily is the fact that it has this ridge, this indentation underneath. And as you do your stitching, that just goes right along the piping and it holds it nicely in place. The ridge is right there where the piping is, so it holds it in place as you stitch over it, and nothing can move at all. It really works easily. It even works, I've discovered, if you put this between 2 layers of fabric. If I would put this down and put the other fabric on top, I find that that little ridge holds it so well that it will control it, and I can tell exactly, once I have this ridge locked in to where that piping is, I find that it doesn't even move, and I can keep very accurately right on that, even though it's covered up by another piece of fabric. So try out those feet that you rarely use maybe on your machine to make sure that you know how they work. The other way is to use a zipper foot. And where I would want to use a zipper foot is if I use something heavier to cord the inside of this piping. What I'm using here is just a piece of yarn, and make sure that this yarn isn't going to shrink. If, for instance, it's a wool, it might shrink. If it's a cotton yarn, it might shrink. This is a synthetic and it has a lot of give in it, so I have no qualms about using this because I know when the pillow top is washed, it really won't shrink. But if you use a heavier cord, and this is the type cording that you would use in welting large cushions, furniture. When you're upholstering furniture, you'd use this kind of heavy, stiff cording. And with this, it's too large to get under this foot that has the ridge in it. So if you were using this, you would definitely want to use a zipper foot. I'll just go ahead and put a zipper foot on here. And I'll get my stitching, I'll get my stitching back to normal. And I'll get the tension back to normal, and the quickest way to do that is just turn the machine on and off, and it does it by itself, so I won't even have to worry about it. So I'm not going to put this heavy cord on right now. On some other series we might do a little bit of heavier cushions, upholstery cushions, and I'll show you how to use that cording at that time. Okay, put this so that the cording is on the outside of the foot and so that the foot is over the flat part when you use this zipper foot, and do your stitching, and I just adjust every few inches to make sure that the cord's there in the center. And I'm going to stitch along there. There's no need for small stitches. I'll put them on bigger so that it goes faster. And it doesn't really matter how accurate I am about this. I'm just enclosing that cord. So it doesn't matter that much if I'm really perfect about it. It will matter when I put it on the pillow. I then want it to be just right. But if I'm not being too careful right at this moment, it won't matter. Now this is bias that I'm using. You can use straight grain of fabric here if you prefer, but bias does the job a little bit nicer, especially around corners, or if you have a rounded pillow instead of a squared off one, it's going to do the job easier to make bias. Let me refresh your memory just briefly on how you make that bias. If you have a straight piece of fabric like this, if you will just fold it so that the lengthwise grain is parallel with the crosswise grain. I'm going to fold this up so that that happens, and when that does, what results here, this fold is a 45-degree angle, which is exactly what I had on the other end, and that's what I cut. So this is that stretchy bias that will work out so well because you have all that stretchiness in it. So use the stretchy if you can. It's going to take maybe a little extra yardage to do that, but it's worth it because it does a much better job, really. So this is how you make the ruffling. This is how you would do the piping. And then there's something else I have back here on a third pillow. Before I leave piping, let me show you something else I did here. I made this originally a 16-inch pillow top purposely because I wanted to put the 14-inch inside it. And after the pillow was completely made, turned right side out, I then just did a row of top stitching an inch away from the edge all the way around, and that made this sort of extra flange here all the way around the outside. But then I have a third pillow down here, and what this pillow has is this ruching around the outside. The way I made that is very similar to the cording that I did, the piping. This is the very same thing, but just done on a larger scale and then scrunched together. So here I have that same fabric, and here I have the cord, and you can find this in the fabric shops, upholstery shops, either one. They both would carry it. Perhaps quilting shops might carry it, but it looks like this. And it's just a lot of sort of cotton stuffing inside a loose web of a net of threads, a network there. And I'm going to do this stitching in the same way. I'll put it on the machine and stitch across it, and then I'll stitch down the side. And as I stitch down the side, I don't want to stitch too close to that cording because of this. I want to gather it up, so I'll just get across there, and my crosswise stitches will hold the cording in place. And then when I come out here, and I'll put that in the down position, when I come out here I want to stay a little bit far away from this because it's going to gather up. I'll do a little stitching, and then I'll pull this on the cord like this, and then I'll do some more stitching, and that's how you do this gathering up process. So you'd first have the cording cut just the size you want it, so that when it's finished and you have all the fabric scrunched on it, it comes out exactly right. So that's how you make these three different types of edgings that I have. And then after you have all those edgings done, this pillow, by the way, is just a straight piece of fabric. I have another little straight piece of fabric right here on the end. And what I've done with that piece of fabric, if my cord will come out, I just have a little casing here at the very end. And I've stuffed that, and then I've tied the cord so that it all comes up into a nice little head roll type thing to put on a bed or to put wherever. Okay, so these are the type edgings I have, and when you make this pillow to actually put on your quilt, you don't really stuff it in any way. You just make the pillow, turn it right side out, and then we're going to sew that pillow around these three edges. I have it loose here, so she can tuck her feet in it, remember. I've just stitched it down around those other three edges, and in doing so, that's where you'd finish off the quilt, the side that you had left open there a little bit for turning. So after this is all stitched all around here, then you're going to turn the pillow right side out. So here comes the turtle out of his shell again. I haven't shown it to her yet, but I think a child will be delighted with this concept. It's kind of fun. Hopefully she doesn't get so excited about it that she can't take the nap, since that's the purpose of it. Okay, You turn the pillow right side out and get the quilt all out here, and it already starts itself. So you can see it's going to be an easy job then to put it inside. It already starts folding itself up. Maybe you can even use this to teach the child a little bit of neatness in her or his room by getting her to do this all by herself. And you tuck it into the turtle then, and it's all set. The room's all neat and it's all set for next nap time. So there we got it. Fluff it up a little bit more, push it in here a little bit harder, and kind of a fun thing. So home decorating is really easy for everyone, as it's fun and it's quick and it's easy, and the results as you improve your home are so satisfying. Now, is all sewing quick and easy? Well, not necessarily, but if you're going to sew, you should always be thinking of how to make it special. Come join me next time to count the ways.